of those returns there. Okay. Now here you need to be able to calculate the standard deviation on your calculator. Let's just make sure we know how to do that. So if you were doing this on, I'll put it up here for a few different calculators. If you're doing this on HP 10V2, for example, and you want to clear your data, or just say clear all, probably. And then put in the first number, 4.24, and hit the sigma plus button, and put in your next number, and so on down to the next number, 2.54.
You skip the line.
Hit sigma plus again. And then on it, you're going to hit an orange key, which is SX, SY.
You have to put the number
That's on
orders.
I know, but I did the.
And that gives you the standard deviation. If you're doing this on your financial calculator from TI,
So what's this?
And then, so, now you do second quick.
then you're going to do
So it's second,
second,
step,
and hit data,
down,
that's the
down,
7 key.
down. There it is.
Then you're going to enter your data. There's 4 numbers. Then you're going to do second,
You have to do the rest.
stat, big key, and then press standard deviation. I'll put one more up here if you're doing, you've got a TI graphing calculator. There we go. List. Map. And then the standard deviation.
Can you see what the last thing is in the MV2?
So if you don't have one of those 3 types of calculators, you'll have to maybe know how to do it or Google it, Tracy, how to do it. But you should be able to punch those numbers in and get the standard deviation of these numbers. And you should get 3.85%. The last step is it's an orange key, it's on the A key, and it says SXSY. And that's your standard deviation. Any other questions on how to do it? Is everybody getting there okay? 3.85%.
It's just trash.
Yeah, it's just standard deviation. It'll come up with standard deviation and it's parentheses. You do some more, another set of parentheses with these 4 numbers inside it.
He's getting an error when I do that.
Me
Pardon?
too.
Yeah, well, those L's.
Did you get from
So there might be different kinds of graphic
Yeah.
calculators.
Did you get it on there? Which?
So you press.
So I know how to. I think I know how to input it. Do you just put them in as the X values, or
Yeah, just the X
Just the
values.
X brackets
Not
inside
the
the
Y.
parentheses.
The Y should just stay as 1.
right? And then
And then you press
And
second
second
stat,
And
which is
then-
just right next to it.
And then keep going
And then
down.
go down, down, down. I think it's the 4th down.
I keep getting 3.15.
It's weird.
I'll try it.
The same thing as you are, 3.15.
That's so weird. So it's 4.24.
But yeah, he's deep.
Yeah, I got 385. So how did you put your values in?
Yeah, I got 2.15 again.
Click on the next one down.
I keep.
Other questions?
Yeah, we both have gotten 3.15 on it.
That's what I thought.
What a negative 1.6.
No, that's what it is probably.
Mine are all. I put mine
There it is.
I did all mine.
I did that first, but then it was way off.
0424.08296. Go for it.
So I'm getting a clarification here, this is
They're the worst.
bracket, not a
Negative 0.0096. And you're leaving your Y values as 1, right? And then the last one is 0.02539.
Yeah, I did. So you still did you put in
All right, so once we have the standard deviation, we're still looking for the annual volatility. So we're gonna take the 3.85.
Yes, absolutely. For sure.
I don't know, that's weird.
Gonna be 3.85 times the square root of 12, because these are monthly returns. And that gives our annual volatility. Questions? All right, so that's one of the key inputs to Black-Scholes, and we'll talk a bit further later on about why volatility is so important. So before we jump into the actual Black-Scholes formulas, I'm going to show you a video clip about how this formula.
Your Y3 is not 1.
Academics were no nearer to pricing options than they'd ever been, nor any closer to Bachelier's dream of a perfect mathematical model of the markets. All this was about to change.
From an early age, I was very, very fascinated by uncertainty. My parents, having lived in a gold mining part of the world of northern Canada, would be always buying penny stocks, or the family would tend to be buying stocks that had very low prices because there'd be some rumor that there'd be another gold find or a silver find, and so the prices would shoot up, or not shoot up. I mean, the family wasn't seem to be getting rich, though. That got me very interested in why was it the case that these prices tend to fluctuate.
In 1968, Myron Scholes and his colleague Fisher Black set out to tackle the problem of options.
When I first discovered options, I became very excited about the possibilities that here was a contract that enabled you to only be able to take the upside of the returns and not the downside, and that being able to take the upside only had value, and that was really exciting.
It was exciting, but a goal that had eluded the greatest minds in economics. They knew that every stock price constantly moved up and down. As it did so, the value of an option on a particular stock fluctuated too. But there was no predictable relationship What they wanted to find was a formula that would obtain the correct price of an option at any moment in time just by knowing the current price of the stock. But they couldn't see their way through the massive equations they'd inherited.
I read the literature, tried to see what others had done, and I became dissatisfied with their various models because they had assumptions that didn't seem to make that much sense to me.
But then they decided to try something different. One by one, they dropped any symbol which represented something that was unmeasurable. All the things that for years the academics had been busily adding to their equations. It was a brilliant insight. The loss of these elements didn't affect the calculations at all. All the symbols had been unnecessary. Now, for the first time, Black and Scholes were left with the bare bones of the problem. The elements which everyone agreed you needed to know to value an option. The stock price, its volatility, the duration of the contract, the interest rate, and the level of risk. They could measure all of these things. They were all quantifiable except one, the level of risk.
I could do that first part, and then I got stuck.
So Black and Scholes decided to think laterally. If they couldn't measure risk exactly, perhaps they could somehow make it less significant. They started with the old idea of hedging, in which gamblers hedge their bets by betting in the opposite direction. The method they devised was to become one of the most significant discoveries in economics this century. They created a theoretical portfolio, a mixture of stocks and options. Then, whenever either fluctuated up or down, they tried to cancel the movement out by making another risky move in the opposite direction. Their aim was to keep the overall value of the portfolio in perfect balance. Since everything moved at random, that was extremely difficult. And at first they could only cancel a little of the movement out. But eventually, using complex algebra and a mass of calculations, they finally found they could balance out a movement precisely. And then another.
After the fact, we call this dynamic hedging. What that means, dynamically hedging, is you want to be able to eliminate the uncertainty of the movements in the stock.
They soon discovered that dynamic hedging could balance out any movement at all. They could create a perfect equilibrium in which risks cancel themselves out.
We were able to build a portfolio that was essentially riskless.
They had found a theoretical way not just to reduce risk, but to eliminate it altogether. By dynamically hedging, Black and Scholes were able to remove the last unmeasurable element. Risk itself dropped out of their equations. And without risk, they finally had a mathematical formula which could give them the price of any option.
If I have the proper recipe for dynamically hedging, then that position is risk-free. What that means is, since I know the price of the stock, the only thing that's left is the price of the option. Unbelievably, I can fix the price of the option. If I know the price of the stock, I now know the price of the option. And that is the miracle and the breakthrough of the Black-Scholes pricing.
Black and Scholes had solved the problem that had baffled generations of academics. It was a marvelous achievement. But there was a practical problem with their formula. It took time to calculate the dynamic hedging. In the time this took, the fast-moving markets would have moved on, and their calculations would effectively be out of date. What was needed was a way to instantly recalculate, to keep eliminating the risk continuously. Unbeknownst to Black and Scholes, someone had found a way.
He was kind of a wunderkind. He was just recognized from the very beginning as an extraordinary intellectual talent. His creative powers, the power of the analytical techniques, mathematical techniques that he was bringing to bear on some age-old questions in economics, savings behavior, investment behavior. It was just obvious that here was a guy who was going to make intellectual history in our field.
In college, I started studying the stock market. I went down to the stock exchange, watched all the activity from the visitors gallery, of people running around, calling numbers, shouting, and all the paper flying and the bells ringing. And of course, that was exciting, and it seemed to lend itself to my analytical skills.
By the early 1970s, Bob Merton had developed a reputation for using exotic and abstract mathematical ways to study financial contracts like options. He was the perfect person for Black & Scholes to contact.
In the fall, I went over our ideas that we had with Bob and spent a lot of time arguing with him about whether our results were robust and exact, or whether there was flaws in our methodology.
So I'm going to reformulate their problem in the context of my modeling that I had developed.
In constructing his own complex mathematical models, Merton had explored theories no one in finance had even heard of. One was to be the unlikely final piece of the jigsaw. Merton turned to rocket science. He had studied the theories of a Japanese mathematician, Ito, who'd faced a similar problem to Black & Scholes. In order to plot the trajectory of rockets, you needed to know exactly where the missile was, not just second by second, but literally all the time. Ito had developed a way of dividing time into infinitely small parcels, smoothing it out until it became a continuum, so that the trajectory could be constantly updated. Bob Merton used this idea and adapted it for the Black & Scholes formula. Using the notion of continuous time, the value of the option could be constantly recalculated and risk eliminated continually.
And then I discovered they were right. By following their procedure, their dynamic trading strategy in stock and cash, at least in the context of my model, they can eliminate all of the risk.
Bob phoned me up one Saturday morning and said that he had an alternative proof to our particular model, and was convinced that it did work. He had used technology that I hadn't been aware of, and Fisher hadn't been aware of, called Ito calculus, to actually solve the problem in a more elegant way, in a more robust way, I think, than Fisher, Black, and I had done.
The formula that Black, Scholes and Merton unleashed on the world in 1973 was sparse and deceptively simple. Yet this lean mathematical shorthand was the fulfillment of a 50-year quest.
We did get the final equation, obviously. That was eureka.
This is great. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. When you solve a problem, you really know you cracked it.
Here was a formula which could, it seemed, get rid of risk in the financial markets. Academics marveled at its breathtaking insights and its sheer audacity.
know and can take my hat off to what that accomplishment was, because I got near the North Pole. But near is no cigar. It exploded.
Okay, so that's a little history on the formula. I was in Robert Merton's class when I was in graduate school in about 1997 or 98, somewhere in there. I think it was just shortly after he won the Nobel Prize, or shortly before that. And not only, was he famous for the Nobel Prize, but also he and Myron Scholes and some other guys had a few years earlier started Long-Term Capital Management, which at the time was the superstar of all hedge funds. They'd made over 40% returns for 3 or 4 years running at the time, and they were just amazing to everyone. As you know, a couple of years later, things went south for long-term capital management, so that took a little bit of the shine off of Merton's star, but he's still recognized, as just one of the great contributors to finance, especially option pricing. So let's take a look at the actual formulas, the one that he was just drawing on the last there. So we can all marvel at the sheer audacity of it. So here's the formula, first recall. Okay, so that's the value of the call. Value of the put. I should mention this is for European options.
The main difference between European options and American is they have to go to maturity, right?
You can only exercise them at maturity.
Yes.
That's the only difference. Okay, there's the formula for a put. But then this has these D1s and D2s in it, so we need to define those as well. So that's D1 and D2. Now these ends with numbers in parentheses, that's signifying the standard normal distribution. So I'll put that over here. It's like a cumulative probability of the standard normal distribution for that number that's inside the n. So this isn't n times d1, it's n of d1 in the standard normal distribution. So those are the formulas. So a couple observations I'll make right off the bat is one, don't be, sort of overwhelmed by how complicated they look. These are just formulas where we're going to input things that we're already familiar with. Okay? Stock price, exercise price, volatility, risk-free rate, time to maturity. It's the same parameters that we've been working with, like in the binomial model. You're just going to plug them into these equations. And second, as you look at the formulas for the call and the put, there should be parts of it that look kind of familiar to you. Okay, so particularly if you leave off the n of d1 and the n of d2, just pretend like those aren't there, and the formula is just S stock price minus strike price discounted back. Okay? That should look familiar to you as just the intrinsic value of a call, stock price minus strike price. Strike price is discounted back because you wouldn't pay the strike price until maturity because they're reissuing options. So if you leave off the n's there, that should look very familiar. Same with the put, leave off the n in both cases, and you just got the intrinsic value of the put, the strike price minus the stock price. So think about the n's on those different parameters as just putting some probabilities on where those values will end up, so to speak. Okay. This part here is complex. I don't have any good intuition for you on where this D1 comes from. We're just going to take that on faith from Black and Scholes. But at least the call and put formula should look at least a little bit familiar to you.
Is it r plus sigma squared over 2?
That sigma squared, this right part here?
Yeah,
Squared over 2.
Over 2, yes.
Okay. Now, one of the cool things, maybe the most surprising thing about the Black-Scholes model is that you'll notice that nowhere in the formula is there the future price of the stock. Okay, all we need to know is the current price of the stock. Right there, right there, right there. Okay. You would think in order to be able to know what the value of an option is, you need to know where the stock price is going to be in the future. Okay. That doesn't enter into the equations here at all. It's not part of the pricing formula, which is good, of course, because we don't know what the future stock price is going to be. What that means is that it doesn't matter what your view about the stock is, you can still agree on what the value of an option is. So suppose that we had a call option on Apple with a strike price of whatever, 100, okay, and it's a 3 months maturity. Okay, so this is a call on Apple. Current price of Apple is somewhere around 102. So you got this call option on that. You can have two different investors who have totally different views about what Apple stock is going to do, and it won't matter. Okay, so you can have this guy who thinks Apple's going to go way up. You got another guy who thinks Apple has seen its best days. It's certainly going to go down. Those are thought bubbles. But yet, both these guys can look at this call option and they will totally agree on what the value of the call is. Okay? Even though in this guy's world, the call is likely to end up worthless, and in this guy's world, the call is likely to end up very valuable, they can both agree on the appropriate current price of the call option. Now that doesn't mean that their views on what the stock's going to do is going to determine whether they want to buy these options or not. This guy might buy a whole bunch of these options, This guy probably won't touch the options because he thinks they're gonna be worthless. But nevertheless, they both agree on what the current value of the option is. That is their views on where the stock price will be in the future does not enter into the Black-Scholes equations.
Some of us have a teacher in Accounting 440 who works with a startup that was bought by Procter & Gamble or something, and she used the Black-Scholes model to determine that valuation process. So how does that extend to something like that? If you don't have a stock price for your own company?
So you can use the, it's kind of interesting. When Black and Scholes first came out with this formula, they had a hard time convincing people that it was important. They had trouble getting their paper published. This is a long answer to your question. They had trouble getting their paper published because they couldn't convince people that it had wide application. It only mattered for this one little special kind of instrument, which wasn't, this is back in the early 70s, it wasn't that popular at the time. So they ended up showing in their paper how it can be used to value all sorts of things, not just the stock, but also like the value of a corporation or the debt of a corporation or something. So I don't know exactly what your teacher would have done, but probably something in the sense of taking just the assets of the company, whatever the value of the assets is, try to estimate the volatility of what the value of those assets would be, and then using the Black-Scholes model to try to put a value on that. So you have the risk-free rate, you estimate the volatility, instead of a stock price, you just have an asset value of the company, and try to estimate the value of the company. Probably something like that. Other comments or questions about the formulas?
So the capital T, is that like the amount of time or the number of time periods?
That is the amount of time to maturity.
Okay.
Other questions? All right, so let's give you a practice problem, just for some practice using the Black-Scholes formula. All right, so give me, what's the price? Of a 3-month 10 strike call. And stock price is 10. Discount rate is 5%. And volatility is 20%. That's the question. Now, one thing you need to be able to do to use these formulas is you have to be able to look up n of something in a standard normal distribution table. So there's one of those in your textbook. If you have that handy, if not, there's one here on Learning Suite that I posted that I'll bring up here. It's under miscellaneous. So this is the table for n of x given x. So what you would do is when you, for instance, when you find D1, just round it to 2 decimal points, and then to look it up on the table, you find the first decimal point, here in the table, and then go across to your second decimal point, and that would give you n of that value. So I will just leave that up here so you can put it together. Don't worry about this interpolation stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. 2 decimal points.
For the table.
That's where I need to mention.
So there's D1 or is it on the side?
I got some.
Yeah.
But I guess.
So you find 0.1 and then over.
Yeah.
So it would be 0.57. So in D1.
0.175 and 0.075.
5714.
So
Because there's 0.18 from D1.
I went to 0.18 and to 0.08.
In D1.
Okay, and so then it's 10 times 0.5714 minus 10 times e to the negative.
Is it negative?
Yeah, because you're discounting it. So the negative 0.05 times 0.25 times 0.5319.
I did it wrong. I just put it in.
Yep.
Because I seen something else.
So is that just the end? You just only one by D1 or? No, that's in D1. That's in D1. So it's reduced
Choose your priority. Basketball, what do you think is most important? And then it creates the bracket for you.
This is like 16 color or like.
It's just like if offense is more important, defense or a balance, and then you rate your priorities on offense.
All right, let's go through this.
Rebounding, shooting on that.
So let's start by calculating D1, D2.
So, and then how much you expect upsets. That's as a college booster, you can choose which one you want. So you can put that up a little bit and then anti-beat by it. That's a lot of people do
So there's D1 comes out to, we have two decimal places, 0.18. D2 is going to be D1 minus D0.
Well, just based on those results.
So we need to look up n of D1 and n of D2. So going back to our table. D1 is 0.18, so we go 0.1 and over to 0.08, that's 0.18. So n of D1 and 0.18 equals 0.5714. And so n of 0.08 equals this one right here, 5.19. Now we can calculate our call value. So call 10 times N of D1
I did it backwards.
minus our strike price, 10, discounted back by 5%.
What's your bottom one?
Times N of 0.08, which is 0.5.
Yep.
That all equals about 46 cents is the value of that.
How do you look up the A value of cell without having to actually do that?
So in Excel, the function is norms dist. So you just put your value in there.
So it has two arguments, and it says Z, which is the 0.08, cumulative, which is
So you're using there, I think, norm.s.dist.
Yeah.
That's slightly different. In there, you would have to put in yes for the
Or
cumulative.
true, I guess.
Or true, whatever. But if you just do norms dist without any dots in there, all you have to put is the value. Either way works. Other questions? All right, so that's a good lead into where we're heading, because I am going to hand out to you here your Excel assignment for the Black-Scholes model. I'll just show it to you briefly here. All right, so the spreadsheet's going to start out looking just like what you did on the binomial model. That's all going to be in place there from before. But then we're going to put, you're going to put up top the Black-Scholes formulas, okay? Now, one thing you should notice is it takes a lot less time to put the Black-Scholes model into the spreadsheet. All you have to do is enter those formulas referring to the inputs over here. Okay? You don't have to build out the whole trees and everything. And then in your assignment, you'll compare your Black-Scholes price to your binomial price. Think about that a bit. You're going to find value of options on Twitter in the first problem. Okay. In the second problem, you're going to evaluate some options that are available online to buy gallons of gasoline. So there's a website that allows you to buy options on gas. And so you're going to evaluate how good of a deal that is that's being offered on that website, whether the price for the options is worth what you pay for. So you'll get to compare Black-Scholes with binomial. So there's two alternative models now that you'll know for pricing options. What do you think are sort of the trade-offs between using binomial and Black-Scholes? What are some advantages or disadvantages of one versus the other?
Never mind.
Okay. Let's start.
Black-Scholes, everybody comes up with the same price.
If they have the same inputs.
Right.
And if everyone agrees on what the volatility is, you're exactly right. But there might be disagreements on what the volatility is. But that's true. Yeah, Black-Scholes doesn't have American options. You cannot do American options with Black-Scholes. Yeah, that's one big disadvantage. Okay. We've shown, you guys did in your Excel assignment, valuing American options in the binomial. Black-Scholes is only for European. Now, of course, we know in some cases those two are pretty similar, but generally speaking, not. So that's one disadvantage of Black-Scholes. Anything else you can think about?
Well, even you mentioned that like the D1, the formula that figured that out is kind of confusing. So it's almost like a black box, whereas with binomial, we can kind of logically work it out.
I think that's true. Yeah, Black-Scholes is a little more of a black box. Another nice thing about binomial is it's not restricted to just standard calls and puts we talked about before, as long as you can show in the final note of your tree what the payouts are for your derivative, whatever that derivative is, you can price it with a binomial tree. But also, one advantage of Black-Scholes is its simplicity. A lot of people use it just because of the simplicity, in the sense that, you know, it doesn't take long to just input those equations in a spreadsheet. It takes some time to set up this kind of thing. The equations are very concise and simple and give you the value very quickly. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both. Black-Scholes tends to get used a lot when people just want sort of a quick estimate of something. But for people trying to be a little bit more careful and want something more versatile, binomial probably gets used in practice more often. I would say it gets used quite a bit more often than the Black-Scholes model in practice. All right, so I will hand these out to you. We don't really have time to work on them in class, so just do these and bring them back next time, and we'll continue on from there. Any other questions or comments?
So on the test, are you going to give us that normal distribution table, or?
I'll expect you to memorize that. Yeah, you'll have to.
What about the formula?
The formulas you gotta memorize, those
Sweet.
When's the Excel assignment?
Next class.
Sir?
That person's gonna hate me.
What's that?
It's been twice now that I've jumped in front of the camera.
No, I actually am not recording it for her anymore.